Starting recording now. Recording has started. You are being recorded. All right. Okay, can you see my screen yet, Ralph?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. All right. Let's do play from the start. Sorry, I put this slideshow together and it's all on one long one, and then I have to like break it out as we go. That's why if you attended last week's class and you saw the follow-up email, you'll realize you only got about 30 slides. So that was part one. Actually, you know what? Let me back up. In case you weren't here last week because you had something better to do, totally get it. My name is Trevor Hubbs, and I run the Armed Forces Initiative for Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. We're doing a lot of these online classes this year. The reason for that is this is the same class that we teach at our Armed Forces Initiative dual skills camps. So we're going to have some on waterfowl, some on upland, some on big game, some on public land access. And this one that you're in right now is on trapping. So the goal is that instead of taking this to 10 or 15 participants individually at each event, we're going to do them online for, I shouldn't say instead of, I should say in addition to our trapping classes, our waterfowl classes, and that. We're going to try doing this online to give this information to as many people as we can. It doesn't cost anything, and if you buy a membership or are a member of BHA or the Armed Forces Initiative already for attending, you will get a membership to OnX. I just got off the phone with our OnX person. Those membership codes should go out tonight to whatever email you used to RSVP to this event. So if you don't get it by Wednesday, probably call me. Welcome to the nonprofit world where I'll send it tonight means I'll send it in 2 to 3 business days. Not a big deal. But anyway, if you were here last week and you thought of a question that you didn't ask or you want more information on something, I'll give us, let's see, we'll do 2 or 3 minutes at the beginning just on some questions from part 1, which was North American Mile Conservation, how does trapping fit in, and then trap basics. Anybody got anything for me question-wise? I'm looking at the screen, Ralph, so you may have to tell me if people have their hands raised or anything.
No, you're good so far. I don't see anything.
All right, well, there's a little hand raise button. Looks like a hand. If you do have a question, raise your hand. Raphael, my lovely secretary, is going to be paying attention for that this whole class. And if somebody raises their hand, he'll call on you and we'll stop what we're doing and answer your question. But anyway, so welcome to part 2 of Trapping 101, or So You Want to Be a Trapper. I forget what we called this course. Part 2 is on land trapping. So contrary to the picture there, I'm going to actually cover raccoons in water trapping, which will be part 3. That's next Monday evening. But and there's a reason for that. It's one of them was going to be longer, and I chose the water trapping, the last one, to be the longest. It's got the most details, but I also have more experience doing that. But tonight we're going to look at species that you're targeting. We're going to talk about trap types, set types. Some of that's going to be repetitive, but the more you see these things, the more you get to look at them, the better off you'll be. We're going to go over some set examples by species, what I've seen work, what I've heard works, what I know for sure works because I've done it. Then we're going to do a little bit of fur handling, a little bit of fur use, and then I'm going to end with a recipe. I only have one recipe for you tonight because I've never eaten fox or coyote, and we'll get to it when we get to it. Let's see. All right. Boom. All right. First, legal disclaimer. This does not certify you as a trapper in any one state. It's not some magic federal course that you can take this course and be a licensed trapper. Your state will have a trapping course that you must take in order to be a licensed trapper, or some states just let you buy a trapping license or carry a fur bearer's license. Whichever your state does, follow your local wildlife agency's regulations. If you're not sure, ask your local warden. You can normally find their information online by Googling Wisconsin game warden or New Hampshire game warden or whatever. If you're really not sure, you can send me an email and I'll Google it for you. Next slide. All right, so we're going to go through trap types first. Again, some of this is going to be a little bit repetitive, but if you've already seen it, that's okay. First one we're going to go over is footholds. Then within that that foothold category, you also have dog proofs. The next one we're going to talk about conibears. Then we're going to talk about cable restraints. Then we're going to talk about cage traps. And these are what you use for dry land trapping. If you were in our general trapping course last week, you'll notice there were more in that. There are more trap types in that course. This is just for dry land trapping. You have a handy little diagram there where it shows you the cage trap is letter D. Then you have various types of footholds along the top. We don't have a conibear pictured there. Raphael, can you see my little screen? Like me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay, so if I hold this up, you guys can see it. That's a conibear. We'll talk more about it later. Let's get into these in a little more detail. So first, we're going to talk about footholds. So footholds are distinguished by size and by jaw type. That's not technically. They also have a power that distinguishes them, where you'll have either a 2-coil or a 4-coil. Now, some of these old bear traps or just like big Wolverine traps, stuff like that, may have like a 6-coil. I've never seen it, and I've only kind of heard about it, and I don't know where you would even buy them. But I've heard they exist, so now you have also heard they exist. So maybe perpetuating a rumor there. But anyway, so first let's talk about jaw type. So jaw type is important. All these traps do the same thing. They grab an animal by the foot and they hold it until the trapper arrives to dispatch the animal and reduce it to that trapper's possession. That's the fancy term for harvesting that animal, killing that animal, reducing it to your possession. Now, the reason we have that phrase is because reducing it to your possession is different than keeping an animal alive, which in many states you are not allowed to do. Some states you are, and releasing that animal in a different area, such as they do with wolves. Wolves is a great example. We've introduced, in the past 20, 30 years, we've introduced wolves all over the country. All of the wild trapped wolves in the United States were trapped with one of these traps you see in this diagram. Well, one of the types of these traps, not those specific drawings. But anyway, so jaw types. First, we're going to go with standard. You look at letter A. That's a standard jaw. It's the same one I'm holding here, if you'd rather look at my little picture. This is almost exclusively what I use, just because I've had the same trap since forever. This is the most traditional trap. It's been around the longest. So what we had with this trap, what's wrong with letter A, or like the weaknesses, is it closes all the way on top. So there's no obstruction, no stick, no animal foot. It's going to be all the way closed. So what that'll do is that'll eventually cut off circulation of that paw. When the circulation is cut off, some animals, some types of animals in particular, will chew their own foot off. We've all heard of that, the coyote ugly joke. But to prevent an animal chewing its own foot off and losing that animal or injuring that animal and not being able to recover it, the rest of these types of traps have been created, and they all work slightly differently. And then some work better for some species, some work better for others. So moving over to B, we have offset traps. So you see how there's a gap in B in the diagram? Just that little gap reduces the pressure enough that ideally this animal will not lose circulation to its foot. It will then not be able to chew its own foot off, because they won't chew their foot off. They can still feel it. And you'll have a higher chance of keeping that animal, reducing it to your possession. Or if you'd like to relocate it, if you're a biologist, a lot of them use B. Now, C is called a laminated trap. So C and F are very, very similar. They're different types. Or I'm sorry, not C and F. C and E are very, very similar. You'll see they have on C, you see the trap closed, and you see it has a gap, and it also has an extra bar on the jaws there. Now, E, you can kind of see this is the same trap, but it's open. You see the bar on top, and you see the additional bar on the inside of the trap. So what that does is it just reduces the surface area of the pressure on that trap. So let's say that trap is 10 pounds of pressure. It's much more than 10. But if it's 10 pounds of pressure, spreading that 10 pounds out over an inch wide space versus that very small 1/8 of an inch that you see in A, and that's just the width of the jaws of the trap, causes it to have less of a chance of cutting off circulation, less abrasion, less chance the animal is going to slip out for any reason. Now, the next one is a laminated trap. Now, rubber trap. That'll look at, if you look at F, it's hard to tell that, but that's rubber. That's meant to be rubber. Rubber is good for a few things, but you almost always have to combine rubber with either some lamination or some lamination and offset in order for it to be effective. Really, rubber is kind of a compromise because, oh, well, it's not going to cut into the animal's skin. That's great. You're also not going to have cuts in the skin when you go with an offset jaw or a laminated jaw. It's just one extra step. If you look at that as a progression from your standard to your offset to your laminated offset to then your rubber offset. So rubber by itself, if you see those traps, they're not doing much but making you feel better. It's you always have to combine rubber with either lamination or offset or both. Let's see. So size. The next one we're going to go through is size. So it's not size of the pan. So if we look at these traps, the piece in the middle that if you step on it sets the trap off, that's called the pan. You can get bigger or smaller pans for any trap you want. You can make them yourself if you're a metal guy, or you can cut them out. Like, people customize their traps all the time. It's one of the coolest things about trapping is if something's working or not working, you can change it. Marcus, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, we got a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to, before we got too far away from rubber and combined with another trap, you mean
Sure.
The trap set on the same hole, you would have two traps on that hole?
No, great question. Sorry. So if you look at C, like, you see how there's that extra rib along the top of the jaw, but there's also a gap there. So that's technically a laminated, because that's what the extra rib of material means, to spread out that surface area. And it's also offset because it has the gap that makes it offset, right? So if you're going from A, B, C, D, E, F, we're going in a progression of what is I don't want to say more humane, but a less risk of pullout foothold trap. That makes sense? Kind of?
Yeah, so I guess the rubber would only be on a portion of the trap, not on both of the jaws.
Well, so it is, the rubber is on both of the jaws. It's just, you'll see if you go to, like, I don't want to call any companies out, but if you go to like a Minnesota Trap or a Fleming Traps or Southern Snares, you'll see rubberized traps, but you'll see a lot of them that are the standard jaw type with just rubber on them, right? Which doesn't really do much good for pullout. It's still going to cut off circulation. The only thing is you got a piece of rubber rubbing against the skin versus the raw metal. And they're not going to last more than a season before the trap eats through that rubber and doesn't do you any good. It's kind of, I'm trying to give you some insider tip on, buy them if you want to, but don't buy them because you think you're making a huge impact on the animal. Like, if you're going to spend the extra money, yeah, exactly. So if you're going to spend the extra money, spend all of it and get a laminated offset jaw with rubber if you want, and you'll be fine. That's primarily for the critters that are going to pull out. So we're looking at, bobcats, notorious for pulling out. Even a big coon will work hard and get itself out. Coyotes will chew a foot off. Foxes, I've seen chew a foot off before on other people's trap line. But especially bobcats will go nuts, and raccoons will go nuts. Fisher will also go nuts. They're not very easily trapped critters. Did I answer your question, Marcus?
Yeah, it sure did. I appreciate it.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, I can also, Marcus, for you, I can grab one out of my garage. I have them just because they're required here in the state of Connecticut.
There you go. So size of foothold. So we're not talking about the pan. We are talking about the spread of the jaw. So number one is muskrat, nutria, mink, skunk, weasel. It's very, very small. I think it's like a 3.5-inch spread. 1.5. That's primarily what I have. I think I'm running 18 1.5s right now. It's kind of the do-all trap. Like, you'll catch a fox in a 1.5. You'll catch raccoon. You'll still catch mink. You'll still catch what am I thinking of? Muskrats. Like, you'll even catch weasel in a 1.5. Like, the pan tensile strength, or not tensile strength, but the trigger pressure on the pan is less enough that you're going to catch those lighter animals like weasels and mink, but the jaw strength is heavy enough that you'll still hold a fox, right? Now, between 1.5 and 2, there's oftentimes a 1 3/4. That's what I have now, where it's just slightly bigger than a 1.5, a little bit more power. I don't actually see a huge difference between the 1.5s and the 1 3/4. I know for a long time, folks like senior trappers would preach only use your 1 3/4 for fox. It's the best trap for fox. And that may be. I've caught just as many fox in a conibear cubby set as I have in a 1.5 as I have in a 1 3/4. I don't, in my humble experience, the 1 3/4 and the 1.5 are relatively interchangeable. Now, the number 2 is slightly bigger. All my number 2s are set right now because I've been having really good luck with them. Really good for otter. You'll catch beaver on them. They will hold. They'll hold fisher just fine. They'll hold a coyote. Particularly, most people like number 3 or number 4 for coyote, but the number 2 will do it. And really, what you're doing as you get to bigger species, 1, you want more jaw or more trap strength to hold that species, but 2, the larger spread on the jaw, just the more likelihood that that critter is going to step into it. Like, you got to think you're going into somebody's house and trying to convince them to step on a bottle cap. Like, think about how often you walk around your house. You probably have the same kind of habits daily. You wake up, you pee, you brush your teeth, maybe you shower in the morning, maybe you shower in the evening, you make breakfast. You probably walk in on your same footsteps more than you think about it. So having a trap that's the size of your first stair would be easier to catch you than having a trap that's the size of a bottle cap. So just that's how you got to think about it, is the larger jaw spread you have, the more likely you are to catch stuff or to catch your target species. Now, the issue is that's why jaw size is regulated per species by most states. For example, I'm not going to be able to pull it up off the top of my head. I want to say you cannot use anything above a size 3 in Wisconsin on dry land. Now, that may be wrong. Like, don't quote me on it. Again, follow your state local regulations. I don't set anything above a size 3 other than for beaver, and my beaver sets are underwater anyway. Let's see. So now, instead of these, all the footholds that you see on the screen there are coil spring. So you'll see each of them have 2 springs underneath, except for F. F has 4 springs. So you have a 2 spring and a 4 spring. And those will be on either side of the pan underneath the jaws, and that's the strength of the pressure that is applied. So if you have 2 10-pound springs, it's a 20-pound trap. If you have 4 10-pound springs, it's a 40-pound trap. You could also have 4 or 5 pounds, and it just depends what you're going for. All the traps that I have are these coil spring traps are for. Sorry, I'm trying to click that button. All the coil spring traps I have are 2 spring, like the one you see in front of my face here. Now, I can add springs. You can buy them secondhand, or you can buy them even from the store, and I can add springs to these other bars to make this trap a 4 spring trap. So let's say I only had number 2s, and I was having a hell of a time with, like, let's say I'm trapping in northern Wisconsin. I'm trying to trap coyotes. I have number 2s, and I'm getting wolves in my set, and they're pulling out, and they're hauling my trap and my stake off with me. Obviously not something you want. 1, you don't want to leave an injured animal out there, or in the case of the wolf, hurt something that's on the endangered species list. 2, I don't want to lose my trap. They're $14 a piece, or sometimes even more, and I want to get it back. So I could increase, instead of buying a new trap for that set, I could increase the strength of that trap by adding springs. So now this is not to be applied to long spring traps, which we talked about a little bit in the first one. Have those traditional, they look like they're super old. It's the same technology that Lewis and Clark took with them in 1803. Long spring traps, you can get them all the way up to number 5. Let's see if I have them here, actually, before I get too crazy. I might have a picture to help us out. Nope. Don't have a picture today. But the long spring traps, they have long springs on them. Number 1, number 11 is kind of like their version of the 1.5, but it's just the same size with 2 springs. You can go all the way up to number 5. I prefer the number 5 long spring for beaver. And then I've talked to dedicated bobcat trappers that prefer the number 5 long spring to a similar size coil spring. Now, the reason for that is if you're in Wisconsin, or if you're in a northern area trapping in a lot of snow, these coil springs can be frozen into ice or snow to where the springs won't actually work. You can trip that pan all you want, and the coil springs will not activate because they're frozen. Now, long springs can be frozen, but it takes much more to freeze a long spring than it does a coil spring. So for folks that are consistently cat trapping in northern Wisconsin, which the season for us in Wisconsin is normally December 26th through like January 15th, I believe, depending on the season you draw, because it's a draw system. We'll use that number 5 long spring because it will not freeze to the ground. We'll talk about that in the bobcat case, so that's just a heads up. So let's move on here. Footholds dog proof. So if you look at these 2 raccoons, you see they each have their paws in a can of white Red Bull. That's exactly what my dog proofs look like. I've got them all set right now. They're this year. Some years I have great years for cubby sets, and I catch more coons there. This year, every coon I've caught has been in a type of foothold, either a 1.5 or these dog proofs. So how this works is you put a little bit of food in the bottom of the dog proof. Raccoon smells it, walks by, sticks its hand in to grab that food. By sticking its hands in, the trap goes off, and it just wraps a little wire. Think of it like a very small pair of handcuffs around the wrist joint of that raccoon. The benefit of these dog proofs is they take almost no commitment from the raccoon to get in. Like, for example, with a cubby set, if the raccoon reaches in, not going to set the trap off. It can grab your bait and walk out. It has to commit with its head if you want to catch it. With a foothold, you're not putting the bait on the foothold, so it's not reaching for it. You have to get the coon to step on it. Where this, you're putting a piece of candy out there or a marshmallow or whatever you want to bait with that's legal in your state. He reaches in, trap goes off, he can't get back out. Then you can harvest that coon, reduce it to your possession. Wildly effective. You can't catch dogs. That's why they're called dog proof. I've heard of folks catching domestic cats. I've never seen it, but I'm also, 2-3 miles back in on my trap line where I have these, so I'm not running into a lot of cats. Occasionally, I will catch a possum trying to use its hands like this, but mostly it's coon. I've never caught a skunk doing it, but I've heard you can't catch skunk. You're not going to catch mink. You're not going to catch weasels. You're not going to catch things that don't use their hands. But dog proofs, if you're looking for the easiest way to catch coons, dog proofs are the one. They're the greatest for coons. Now, problem with dog proofs are the disadvantage is you're not going to catch other critters. Whereas I know when I set up a cubby set or a number 1 with a dirt hole set, I could catch a fox there. I could catch a raccoon. I could catch a mink. I could catch a skunk. I could catch all kinds of cool stuff. Next, we're going to talk about conibears. Conibears, if you look at this little picture of me, this is a conibear. This is a 220. Let's get into them. So body grip traps, also called a conibear trap. They're very useful. They're very efficient. They were invented in the 1950s. They're traditionally used in submersion sets for mink, muskrat, and beaver, or they can be used on land sets like we'll see here in a cubby or mailbox set, or just some people call it a box set, although that's different than a cage trap. I know some of this terminology is confusing. I've tried to make it as easy as I can, but in reality, people were just inventing terms as they went along. And now we just have this really convoluted system of what is what. So you're just going to have to memorize it. It's kind of like if anybody took French in high school, how it doesn't make sense. Anyway, on land, large body grip traps are used to capture and kill animals. So if you have pets or you have non-target wildlife in the area, don't set one of these. You're going to kill, instead of a cat walking past or a cat getting caught in your foothold and then you have to release it, or a dog caught in your foothold and you have to release it and it goes home a little swollen but undamaged, a conibear is designed to kill that animal. This is a large mouse trap. It's going to go, and it's going to go hard. So most states have restrictions on where you can use conibears, right? And on the size conibear you can use. So let's see, when using a large body grip trap, so in Wisconsin, the large traps, they're talking about are 330s and 220s, like the one I have here. When using a large body grip trap, don't trap alone, for one, if you can help it. And if you do, like I do, be very careful. If you get your foot stuck in a 330 or your arm stuck in a 220, it's about impossible. Not impossible, but it's real tough to get that trap unset on your own. So then you just got to walk back to the truck with a 220 on your arm, slowly cutting off circulation. I've done it. Sucks. Let's see. Trap with a partner whenever possible. Body grip traps come in many sizes. The 110 we talked about last week. I've caught more animals in a 110 than I have in any other trap. Just primarily because that's what I started with, trapping for muskrat. You'll get muskrats in them. You'll get weasels. You'll get mink. They're a great trap. 120, I have a couple 120s out. They're like a souped up 110. It's just a 110 with 2 springs. You can catch muskrat, you can catch raccoon, mink, skunk, marten, and possum in it. They'll dispatch them just fine. You have the 220, which is bigger animals. I only set 220s underwater. I've caught otters in 220s. I've caught muskrat in 220s. I've caught beaver in 220s. You can also set them on land if you have the right sized cubby for safety of any non-target critters that may be in the area. The biggest thing is the biggest traps on conibears will also catch the smallest animals. It's not an issue. The issue is using the right size trap. So, for example, this 330 is huge. There's just a lot of area for even a small beaver could swim through this trap and not set it off. A muskrat certainly could. If I was breaking the law and setting this on dry land for raccoon, a raccoon could crawl through this no problem without setting it off. Right? So you have to use the right size trap for the targeted species. Now, some states and provinces limited jaw spread on body grip traps. Before setting traps, check your local regulations. Like everything, I'm going to say it about 100 times tonight. For dry land sets, 4.5 is usually the jaw spread limit. Now, that depends if they're in a cubby or a box setup or a mailbox set like we talked about last week. Those rules are different. In Wisconsin, I can have 6.5-inch jaws on dry land with no cubby. That's my max. But 4.5, that 110 or 120 is normal. So again, check your state. For submersion sets, a jaw spread greater than 7 inches is illegal in most areas, except during the beaver and otter season. Then during beaver season in Wisconsin, we don't allow smaller traps out. So during beaver season, beaver season overlaps with mink and muskrat by about 15 days. So April 15th, muskrat and mink season closes. But beaver season doesn't close until April 30th. So for those 2 weeks, I cannot have 110s, 120s, anything smaller than this 220 on my trap line in Wisconsin. The reason for that is they want to limit the take of non-target species like mink and muskrat. Now, I'll absolutely still catch mink and muskrat in that 220 if that muskrat or mink is uncoordinated or stumbles through and happens to trip the trap. But ideally, a muskrat or a mink could swim through that if they were paying attention and not set it off, whereas an otter or a beaver will absolutely set it off. Next slide. Here's some conibear pictures. If you look at the picture on the left, that's what I mean when I say a box set, cubby set. Some people call them mailbox sets because they're literally using old mailboxes. And if you look at the right, technically that is a land set, right? It is not. So to be considered a water set in Wisconsin and in most states, the trap must be at least 50% underwater when tripped. Now, the way that trap is propped up, one, it's not 50% underwater now, but when it goes off, it will not be 50. It will be 100% out of water. So that is not a legal set if you're in a state that limits size. Now, if you're in a state that doesn't, I don't have an example of that. Alaska doesn't, but they have a lot less non-target species running around. That would be fine, but in most states, in the lower 48, that would not be okay. Next slide. Dog in a conibear trap. You should have gotten a link to a blog post that I put out if you were here last week. If not, you'll get it by the end of this week when I send these slides and these documents out. This is the same link last time. Watch it. This is how you can get a dog out of a conibear trap without your conibear tool. You can use a leash. You can use your knee. You can use a rope. You can use a stick. It's all about leverage. It's not impossible. It's if you don't know how to do it, the biggest thing you can do is turn that conibear trap from having a horizontal piece on the throat, turn it to where you have a horizontal piece by each ear, because that's where the pressure is going to be. You're a lot less likely. You buy yourself hours by twisting that trap. Now, you might hurt that dog by twisting the trap, but you're not going to kill him. So if you're out and you're running like I do, I have 2 Irish setters. I bird dog hunt in all kinds of states where folks may be trapping where I'm hunting. My dog sticks his head in the wrong box or tries to run into a slough or something to go after a down pheasant, gets caught, gets its head stuck in a conibear trap. If I don't have my trap setters and I don't have a leash on me, I'm in rough shape until I get somewhere with a bolt cutters. So 1, I keep bolt cutters in my truck. 2, I keep a leash in my truck that I can use to undo this trap. But 3, what I'm immediately going to do is turn that trap to where the bars are on his ears, not on his throat and the back of his head. The bars on his throat, you've got 5 minutes on a big dog. If it's on his ears, you have hours. Now, you may cut the ears. It may cut into the side of his head a little bit, and that'll be uncomfortable, but the dog won't be dead. How do I avoid this? I use best management practices. We talked about these last week. These are practices that every state has combined and put together for the best way to trap, the most ethical way to trap. It talks about sets. It talks about types of trap per species. I follow BMPs, and I don't even set a trap that isn't a dog-proof trap or underwater when there is a hunting season that people use dogs for, right? So quail season, duck season, I wait till those are over, primarily because I'm hunting those things, or I'm trapping in an area like a densely wooded forest where people are not pheasant hunting or people are not duck hunting. Like, just use common courtesy, take every step you can to avoid setting a trap that will catch a dog, especially a conibear trap. It is not something you want to run into. I was actually in the process of setting a conibear trap in this otter run 2 days ago, and a guy walking his yellow lab just came bumbling down the trail. One of the best parts of hunting in the snow is you can see where everything's running because they're leaving trails. One of the worst parts is people can see you. This is a guy was not a hunter, not an angler, not a trapper, just walking his yellow lab off leash, and it's like, hey, how'd you get back here? I'm on public land, but normally nobody comes to this. Like, there's no trail. He's like, well, I saw these footsteps. I thought they put in a new trail. So inadvertently, by me walking this same path every day, I've created what appears to be a footpath for hikers. Very unfortunate, but advise them right away. Hey, I'm out here. I have beaver sets in. I have otter sets in. I have a lot of traps that your dog could get caught in. Now, none of them that could hurt a lab-sized animal are out of the water. Everything is below the water, but he could get his foot caught if it's sniffing around. It's not ideal. And he said, oh, wow, I didn't realize that. And he was like, I'll just walk on the other path. It was actually a very pleasant conversation, but if you see that happening, have a conversation with, like, if you're heading out of your trap line, it just got done trapping, you see somebody heading out, walking their dog, just advise them, hey, I have traps out in the area. The constant line I use is, hey, I'm a certified Wisconsin trapper, which once you pass your trapper's education, you are, well, for whichever state you're in. Certified Wisconsin trapper. I'm here removing meso predators from the landscape, which is raccoons, possums, skunks, foxes, things like that. I do have some foothold traps out right now. I'll tell you exactly where they are. Or in my case, for this specific property, I'm only trapping one side of the river. So as long as people stay on the side of the river that has established paths, we'll be fine. Also, I'm normally trapping during the coldest times of the year, but it's a crazy winter, and now it's going to be 50 degrees tomorrow, so people are out having fun. Normally, I'm by myself, but just something to be aware of. Watch that video when you have time if you haven't already from last week. All right, let's talk about the next size, cable restraint. Cable restraints are huge in Wisconsin. They're a great way to catch land animals like coyotes and foxes. Bobcats get caught in cable restraints all the time. So you're looking at that diagram and you're saying, Trevor, that's a snare. It's not a snare. So the biggest difference between a cable restraint and a snare is two things. First thing, that minimum loop stop ferrule. So what that is, if you see that in the diagram, is that prevents this cable from ever being tightened farther than, depending on the state, some of them are 9 inches, some of them are 6 inches, depending on your regulations. And when you buy these, you can either make them home or you can buy, it'll say Wisconsin legal cable restraint or Missouri legal cable restraint. So it will stop that. So the goal being, it stops the circle from ever being small enough to choke that animal. It just won't happen. Now, the second thing that makes this a cable restraint and not a snare is, if you look in the top right of that diagram, it says relaxing lock. So what that does is, instead of constantly twisting down tighter and tighter and tighter, like a snare, eventually choking the animal, a relaxing lock, when that animal stops pulling, the lock will relax. The best way to think about it is those cheap leashes that you get at the vet that just loop around your dog's head. And if your dog pulls, it chokes them. If it stops pulling, stops choking them. Same thing. They're just made of 3/32 seconds cable. I get these pre-made because they're really not expensive. I think they're like $2 a piece. They are one-time use only, though, because once you catch an animal in it, he's going to chew on it. She's going to chew on it. And it's not going to break it, but it's going to kink it up a lot to where it will not work effectively. Now, you can cannibalize them by taking off your minimum stop ferrule, your breakaway device, your stabilizing tubing, your relaxing lock. You can take all those pieces off and build your own with new cable. But in reality, for me, in my situation, working at a nonprofit, it's still easier and cheaper for me to just buy new ones every year. I buy 2 dozen a year, and I'll go through. I think I've got a dozen left, so I'll probably have some left for next year. But yeah, there's other things to think about. There's a breakaway attachment. So with a breakaway attachment, normally I get them with 350-pound breakaway attachments. You can get them in 250, depending on your state regs again. But what that is that's a set piece of metal that will break with 250 or 350 pounds of pressure. What that means in Wisconsin is if I get a bear that runs through this cable restraint, gets its head stuck, bear's got no problem pulling 350 pounds and breaking it. Then it just has a collar on, and eventually that collar will take off, or he'll scratch it off with his head because, again, it doesn't tighten down. Same with deer. Deer have no problem pulling a 350-pound breakaway device. Just helps not catch non-target animals. You cannot anchor these with a drag is a big thing with these. So what that means, we talked about a drag. Picture most traps are held in with a stake. A lot of wolf trappers prefer drags on their footholds, because with a drag, you're not going to run into a hard stop like a stake. Like a stake, trap has a hard stop. He's pulling directly against it. He could pull his foot out of that trap, a wolf especially. But with a drag, that drag is probably going to catch on some debris. It's going to catch on some like small sapling trees, where instead of a hard stop, you've got a little give and take, because that tree is going to flex. And that wolf is less likely to pull out. Same with if you're a biologist and you're trapping mountain lions, same thing. A lot of them use drags. You cannot use one of these with a drag, because they're going to, if that drag wraps around a tree like it's intended, and that animal keeps pulling, it will choke itself out, and there's just a greater risk of harm for this something to break and it be used more like a snare, which is what we don't want. So you must use either an earth anchor or the cross stake method for these cable restraints. I use earth anchors. Wolf Fangs is a very popular brand. They're a little more expensive. I just use the Easy Anchor system. They're cheaper. They're not as good, but I'm not trapping wolves or anything crazy. Mostly I'm targeting foxes, and I get a few coyotes every now and then. Using a chin lift is ideal with these. Basically, you just put a stick in the trail. So you set these in a trail, like an established trail. What some people will actually do is if they're trapping on private land, they will deposit their deer carcasses from deer season in one pile. So whatever you're not using, the ribs, the bones, whatever. And as these trails get established from coyotes coming to and from this big pile of carcasses, they'll set these cable restraints the acceptable distance away from that bait pile. Depending on your state, I think in Wisconsin, it's 25, maybe even be 50 yards. But they'll let coyotes establish those trails. They'll set these in the trail to where as the coyote's walking, it sticks its head through that circle. Seems ridiculous. Happens all the time. It's actually super easy to catch coyotes this way. But most canines put their nose to the ground, which means their nose won't go through that loop unless you put a stick or a rock or something to make them pick their head up slightly when they're coming down the trail. Well, there's a YouTube link that goes over all this that you have access to, and if you don't, you will by the end of the week when I send it to you. Cable restraints continued. You could catch beaver. You can catch other stuff in a cable restraint. Primarily, it's foxes, bobcats, and coyotes. Sliding lock we already talked about. Oh, these devices also need to include a swivel that allows the loop to turn in the same direction as the animal. This prevents the cable from twisting or kinking, which is, again, could increase the chance that animal could choke itself like a snare. So most of everything I've ever bought comes with a swivel. You can buy a bag of swivels, 50 swivels for $5 and just clip them onto the end. So then you have double swivels. It's not hard to do. Let's see. Cable devices must be used carefully as they can trap livestock, deer, or other non-target animals. Devices with loop stop or breakaway locks can help avoid this problem. We talked about all that. Let's see. Next is cage traps. Cage traps are wire mesh. They come in different sizes. They have doors that vary in size. Several different kinds are really popular for muskrats. We talked about this last time. They call those colony traps when they're down underwater. Colony trap, basically it's a trap that has entryways on both sides. Put them in a run. Muskrat swims in. Muskrat can't swim out. Muskrat drowns. You reduce your possession. Sometimes you'll catch a mink there too. Now, that's a one-way door on a colony trap, which is a type of cage trap. The cage trap used on dry land as live restraining devices are the kind you buy at Ace Hardware or Home Depot, right? You're going to have a one door, animal's going to walk in, sniff at the bait, ideally step on a lever that shuts the door behind them. They can't get out. This is ideal for live trapping. Folks use these all the time. You don't have to be in season to use them in Wisconsin. They use them on their private land, in their gardens. They catch coons and things that are tearing up their trash, and then they go relocate them somewhere else. Cage traps, they come in a bunch of different sizes. It's going to say the size of animal the trap is for on the side. People use them for squirrels even. I don't use cage traps. I have one colony trap that's collapsible. That's in a ditch right now catching muskrats. The cage traps for dry land, they're very big and unwieldy unless you have like a four-wheeler, side-by-side snowmobile, or just are a lot stronger than me. They're just super unwieldy to carry around with you. But cage traps.
We have a question. Yep.
Shoot.
Hey, just real quick, just back to the cable restraints. You mentioned that those got that relaxing clip on it or whatever, so it's not going to keep cranking down and cranking down. Does that allow the possibility that that loop is going to widen and they're going to be able to slide out of there? Or how's that work to where it doesn't crank down, but it still contains them?
Sure. So maximum loop stop is what you're looking for. So the top left of the slide. So it's the opposite of the minimum loop stop. So minimum loop stops it from closing too tight. Maximum loop stops it from closing too open. But you're exactly right. So if a coyote or a dog, whatever, was in this and wanted to calmly back its way out, it could. It just doesn't happen.
Okay.
They get upset that they're caught and they pull and they pull and they pull and they're there. I'm not saying it can't happen, but
pretty uncommon.
It just doesn't happen. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. No, good question. So this is a cage trap for a coon in this picture.
We got
they work about the same. Oh, another one. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. His question just kind of made me picture that a little bit. I got a raccoon, or I got a coyote that comes in with the trap. Instead of calmly backing out, it's usually caught in its mid body or around its neck. What's a common catch point on an animal like that?
So I've seen them both ways. It depends on the size of the critter. For the ones that I set, I only buy the same ones all the time, which are designed for coyotes. So I'm normally catching coyotes around the neck, but you'll catch foxes around the middle because they'll get their two front paws through them. Like they're just going that fast that they're caught around the waist. Smaller coyotes could do that as well. I've had one of those do that in the past couple of years. But it doesn't truly matter. Now, the reason that matters is you always want to go for around the neck, because if it's around the waist, you have that fur, especially by the hips, is thinner and easier to wear. So if you are retaining that fur for sale, and let's say you left that fox in that cable restraint for 24 hours, like you set it, and like within 10 minutes of leaving, that fox gets caught, and then it's just rubbing all the next day until you come out there to check your trap again. When you take that fur to the fur buyer, they will notice that rubbing, and your fur will be worth less. It will be a lower quality fur than had you caught them around the neck.
Copy.
That make sense?
Sorry, I needed to visualize that, and I do appreciate it.
No, you're fine. This class is a lot better in person. We're trying these online ones out. They're interesting. So let's talk about set types. So what you're going to learn is there is hundreds, if not thousands, of set types that are all derived on the same principle. It's just some guy invented it and it worked really well, or some gal invented it and it worked really well. You'll see we're going to talk about a dirt hole set and a cable restraint set. Dirt hole set is the same as a pocket set. It's just in a different location. You could set double dirt holes, single dirt holes, triple dirt holes. You could do P sets that are really just the same concept as dirt hole. All these sets is you're going where animals that you want to catch live, and you're getting their attention, and hopefully they walk close enough to get caught. So with that, let's talk about dirt hole set. And you can literally buy books and just see 100 different kinds of sets, but you can invent your own sets too. Like I have something that I call a stump set that I'm sure other people do, but it's a pocket set with a stump. So dirt hole set, Good for fox, coyote, wolf, badger, raccoon, skunk, possum. I like dirt holes. I like pocket sets because you can catch so much stuff. So get the animal's attention. You want scent. You can put it on a fence post. You can put it on a stone like we saw in the last picture. You could put it on a tree or even just a stick with a little cotton ball on top. So that's going to be called lure. We talked about that last time, the difference between lure and bait. Lure is a smell that will attract an animal to your scent. Now, then you have bait inside the hole. It's a 2 to 3 inch diameter hole. You want it 6 or more inches deep. Can't make that hole too deep. Shallow hole is bad. Deep hole is good. 2 to 3 inch diameter hole, and in that hole, you want bait. So lure attracts an animal to your scent. Bait will make it dig at that hole and try and get something out. So you want that trap directly in front of the hole, because ideally that coyote, that fox, that wolf, whatever is putting its paw right in that hole, trying to make that hole bigger. It steps right in your trap. It's a no-brainer. It works all the time. It works for tons of types of critters. I love the dirt hole set. So you see on the left, we've got that rock. Now, if this was my set, I have the trap right in front of the rock, the hole under the rock, like you could just kind of slightly see it. I'm going to stuff that hole with some all predator is my go-to bait, but you could also stick a can of tuna down there. This year I've been having more success with sardines instead of tuna, but I try and just switch that up as we go, just every other season, to see what happens. A canned ham salad I've tried, haven't caught anything on it, so I wouldn't recommend it. And then I would put on top of the rock, I would squirt some fox pea or even some beaver castor. You can add beaver castor to just about anything, and it's going to attract something because it's such a powerful smell. But so you got lure on the rock. They'll smell that. They'll bring the animal in. You got the hole under the rock. They're going to smell the bait in the hole. They're going to put their foot in the trap. On the picture to the right of that, you see the person wearing gloves. That's very important with any canine trapping. Their nose is powerful. Wear gloves. They don't necessarily have to be these super rubberized gloves. People wear like mechanic gloves and stuff all the time, and they seem to be having success. I normally have a pair of these rubber gloves on me because I'm putting in some sort of water set, and I don't like my hands to be all wet. But you see how he's bedding that trap under the ground. That's very important. So you want to dig out the ground, put the trap in the ground, and then cover that trap with some loose dirt. You see in that picture, he also has some loose dirt. Some people will use waxed dirt in the winter because it won't freeze. Some people use sand. So the animal's not going to see the trap. It's going to step on what it thinks is fresh dirt because whoever made that hole dug that hole. And the trap is going to go off from under the ground, grab the foot. So here's another diagram. If we look on the one that I drew, we have a backing. So backing, it could be grass, could be a little tree, could be a rock. We have the trap under the ground. We have the bait down in a hole. That's like a 2-inch hole. I put being a tuna, what you could do is you can get some cotton balls or some sheep's wool and stick those on top of the bait. That way they don't look down there or smell down there in the hole. There's a little bit of wool, there's a little bit of cotton, there's something for them to play with because you want them working at that set for as long as you can keep them interested there. The longer they work the set, the more chance they have of getting caught. So in the picture on the right, you have a 2-hole set. Those are smaller holes. Those are not 2-inch holes. Those are like the width of a hammer handle. So I think what I did there is I just drove some stakes in, wiggled them around, then pulled the stakes out. And that's just giving them something different. I do stuff at the end of the season or when I'm desperate and not catching anything. And we're just trying to see what happens. So I've got bait in both those holes. He's going to come work it. It's going to be something new he hasn't seen. Ideally, he steps on that trap pan that you can see in that picture, that silver spot in the middle of the dirt. Next, we're going to talk about a field cable restraint. This is an animated picture, but you have I use coat hanger wire, and I stick that coat hanger in the ground, and that props this loop up at head level. So you see the loop, we have a spring in there, we have a breakaway device, minimum stop, maximum stop, and then you have a double staked, you can't really hardly see it, in the bottom right corner of the picture is double staked. This is great for anything that uses the same trails over and over. Bobcat, fox, coyote, wolf. You're going to catch. You can catch coons, you catch foxes and stuff, or skunks and stuff in it, but primarily canines and large cats are what you're going to catch here. So this is my friend Sky Good in Wisconsin. She's probably one of the best trappers I know. She's got a nice bobcat in that cable restraint set. So here's one that you kind of see how you can make that cable restraint disappear in that tall grass. So it looks like they may have had that like bought a professional cable restraint holder there that doesn't look like it's bent coat hanger like I use, but I bet, especially when you're starting out, bent coat hanger works just as well.
Got another question, Trevor.
Shoot.
So I guess this was a few slides back. You'd mentioned with the rubber gloves. I don't know if you're going to get into this later, but with trapping, isn't there something like with boiling traps too?
Yeah. So no, that's a great question, and we weren't going to talk about it. So I'm glad you brought it up. So with traps, what I do every year, I don't do this one because this one's broken. It doesn't set right. It just hangs in my basement as a decoration. But you'll boil the traps, and that's going to get new traps, especially all the grease from last year off of them. You want that grease to float to the top. Then you're going to, of their big pot, then you're going to skim the grease off. You're going to pull the traps out of that boil, and then you're going to wax and dye them. So what I do is I put dye in the water that I'm boiling them in. So once I scrape the grease off the top, they've been boiling 5-10 minutes. Put some dye packets. You can use like walnut dye is probably most common. It's like a blackish or dark brown dye. And that's just going to make sure they're not super shiny metal traps. And then I'm going to put wax on top of the still like warm simmering water that now has dye in it. So trap goes in the water, sitting in the water is dyed. When I pull the trap out, it's going to get that coat of wax because the wax and the water are going to separate. And now you have a waxed trap. And the reason you have a waxed trap is it makes it less likely to freeze and less likely to hold scent. So it does make, do not ever do this with conibears. Conibears don't need, you can paint them if you want to. Don't ever wax and dye conibears. That's strictly for footholds. You don't need to do it with cable restraints either. But with footholds, yes, wax and dye your traps. And boiling is part of that waxing and dyeing process. Now, the more you boil a trap, it will make these springs less effective. But a general rule of thumb, like the manufacturers will tell you on the trap, like how often to replace the springs. I've been replacing about every 5 years, sometimes 6 or 7 years. When I think about it, I'll buy new springs, put them on, and I don't have too much trouble with pull-out, but I'm also not running a long line. Like I think the most I have out is 24 sets. So I'm not running 100 a day or 100 where I have to make sure each one of my, I'm not living by the fur I catch, I guess is the best way to put that. I have a real job. It's teaching you people how to live by the fur you catch. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Thanks.
All right, let's see. Coyote. So next part, man, we're going to go over. I'm really sorry, guys. You're going to get these slides, but I'm going to try and burn through this. For these, we're going to go through the species. We're going to do a little bit of biology, then a little bit of like the best sets to catch that species. So this is a coyote. It's a small dog, 35, 40 pounds would be a big one. They're opportunistic predators. They're going to eat mice, voles, rabbits. They'll be deer. I've seen them run down deer this year even. I've seen the results of them running down deer. Coyotes are everywhere all across North America. The best way to find them is to find coyote tracks or just see them while you're driving around. Breeding takes place in late January. The biggest thing for breeding, or like why coyote season gets real hot and heavy around this time of year, is you've got males that are running around looking for mates. This is when I would use like heavy pee on any of my dirt holes because I want any coyote to think, oh, that is a new smell. That's not my pee. That's somebody else's pee that I don't recognize. I need to go look at that. Right? That's the whole point of lure. And it's supposed to work like that all times of year, but especially right when we get into breeding season is when that lure kind of works the best. So trapping coyotes, the best way to trap coyotes is with cable restraints and jaw type traps. So there's a thing in here. We just talked about jaw type traps. Talked about dirt hole sets. There's such a thing as a powered cable device. We haven't talked about them. I've never used them. I've never seen them used, but essentially it is a spring-loaded cable restraint that goes in a foothold. So instead of jaws that close on the animal's foot, a cable restraint closes around its ankle. It's supposed to be very effective. I think they're primarily used by biologists. I've never seen them used. I've never heard of them used. A lot of the Wisconsin, the state I'm in, does not allow you to use them. So if you're going to use them, if you're going to buy them, this is not the class to learn about them because I don't know enough to teach it. Non-powered cable devices, that's what we just talked about, cable restraints. So the best set for a coyote is that dirt hole set. Got 2 examples of coyotes caught in dirt hole sets. You could do 2 sets right next to each other. A big thing that I've seen with sets is, whether that sets for raccoon or fox or whatever, is if I see a piece of like poop, like scat, I will put that scat right on top of my set. Because the coyotes are going to see that, they're pawing at it. I have very good results putting that scat right on the set. If I see a bunch of scat in the same area, I'll set 2, maybe even 3 sets right on it. I have 3 dog-proof sets for coons within 12 feet of each other right now. Anyway. So you can use cage traps for coyotes. Here's a picture of that. They don't work as well, but they do work. You will catch coyotes in a cage trap if you won't catch as many as you will with the dirt hole sets. Dryland cable restraint, you'll see here how that animal is pulling his hard away backwards the direction it came on that cable restraint, and it's just tightening more and more and more. Well, not more and more and more. It is staying tight to where that animal cannot pull out unless he tries to retreat very slowly and gracefully, which just almost never happens. I'm sure it's happened sometime. I've never seen it. But it won't tighten down to choke the animal because it's cable restraint, not a snare. Next is fox. Treat fox like you would tiny coyotes. I've never caught a gray fox. It's one of my personal goals. I know we have a lot more gray fox in northern Wisconsin than central Wisconsin, where I am. One of these days or one of these years, I'm going to go up there and spend 2 weeks just targeting gray fox. For these purposes, though, I'm going to talk about red fox. Red fox are in most of the country. They're going to have a lot of the same habits as coyotes, with the exception that red fox will not run in a pack. Now, at certain times of year, they will run in partner groups of 2, sometimes 3, but normally the groups of 3 are a mama with several subadult children. They live all over 7 to 15 pounds. Their tails make them look much bigger than they actually are. Red foxes are omnivores, which means they'll eat berries, they'll eat rabbits, they'll eat some even roots, they'll eat fish, as pictured here. So, but when I say all predator bait, like it sounds like all predator bait, but it's a brand. Not a sponsor. Don't feel obligated to buy from them. That's what I buy because it's easy and it doesn't comes prepackaged and it's just easy. Next, so let's talk about setting these. The best traps for fox are jaw type traps with a 2-pound set. A 2-pound dog. The dog is the thing that holds the pan in place. So meaning it takes 2 pounds of pressure, right? You want a little lighter than you would for a coyote. 1.5, 1 3/4, number 2, best jaw type traps for foxes. Powered cable devices. We talked about those. I don't know enough about them. I know that there's enough written about them that somebody uses them. I just have never seen them used. Non-powered cable devices, you can use these and you'll catch fox in the same set that you catch coyotes in. Next, so we've got another. This is the exact same picture for a dirt hole set. Exact same way I would set for coyotes, I set for fox. Now, in this picture, it's a coyote in this cubby set, but you can also set, I catch one, maybe, I've caught 3 fox in a cubby set in a year before. Normally I catch 1, maybe 2. And I'm using the same bait as I would for coons, sardines, tuna, some of that like ham salad stuff comes in a can. And I'm setting the same way that I would for a raccoon or a mink with a 160 or a 155 size trap, which we went over last week. You'll get, every now and then, you'll get a coyote that is hungry enough to stick his head in that trap, or a fox that's hungry enough to stick its head in that trap. I've never caught a coyote doing this. This is not my picture, it's my friend's. And real quick, that trap will dispatch that smaller animal. Now, the difference is if you're setting BMP cubby sets, so BMP, best management practices, normally that trap is recessed too far for a coyote or fox to get its head in there. Now, again, best management practices sometimes are mandated by law, sometimes are not. I have some 160 size conibear or body grip traps that are not mandated to be in any kind of a box. So they're not recessed back. They're at the very front of the box. I find that's a lot easier to catch mink and weasel in sets when they're at the very front of the box. Those are what I catch fox in. at the very front. I never catch them in the one where it's recessed back, but I catch a lot more coon when it's recessed back because the coon has to fully commit to the box. So you just I have more misses when the trap is at the front, but when I don't miss, you can catch fox that way. Now that wouldn't be if I was going to set one set for fox and I was only wanted fox, I would set dirt hole sets all day long with fox pea on a rock or a fence post. And honestly, if I could find like a bird's nest that had been abandoned or a mouse's nest, I would stick that down in that hole so you have that natural smell of birds or mouse, because that's what the fox is going to want. Bobcat, next critter. Bobcat, medium-sized member of the cat family. You find a 30-pound bobcat. It is massive. Everybody hunts a bobcat, traps a bobcat. They pick it up, and they're like, oh, my God, it's 30 pounds. It's not. I have seen the largest cat I've ever seen was 27 pounds. It was my buddy's. I think I have a picture of it in here. And it was huge looking, especially in the winter in the northern parts of the country. They're so puffy, like with so much like just fur on them. They look so much bigger than they actually are. Bobcat is strictly a carnivore. It's not going to eat berries, not going to eat roots or anything like that. It's going to eat small mammals, rabbits, squirrels, pine squirrels, muskrats, even mink. If a bobcat will eat a raccoon that's caught in your trap, they'll get after it. They are found in all 48 contiguous United States, some Canadian provinces. They are non-tropical Mexico, like northern Mexico, southern Texas, where you're going to catch the best-selling bobcats if you're interested in fur. So in Wisconsin, I have to draw a bobcat tag, and I can only trap one per tag. I only get one tag like every 3 or 4 years. In Texas, you can catch a lot of bobcats, and what they're looking for in bobcat fur value is they want a big white spotted belly. Like nobody, as far as fur buyers are concerned, nobody really cares about the brownness on the top or even the size of the cat. They want a big white belly with a lot of spots. Now, the farther south in the U.S. you go, generally you end up with more white and more spotted fur, but smaller sized bobcats. So you'll catch big bobcats in Massachusetts. You'll catch big bobcats in Maine, Wisconsin, Montana, but they'll have that big brown back on them and less spots. So I think they're cool no matter what, but if you're just looking for fur value, that white spotted belly is what the fur buyer wants. So trapping bobcats, the biggest thing of trapping bobcats is a visual stimulus. So that brings to mind site exposed bait law. So you cannot have, in Wisconsin, you cannot have bait that is site exposed that consists of fur, fins, or feathers. So you can't have like a piece of fish hanging in a tree. I can't zip tie a can of tuna to the side of a tree just exposed for anything and then set a foothold under it. The reason for this is you don't want to catch a bird of prey in your trap. That's why you need to keep those dirt hole sets 6 inches deep, deeper if you can get them. You do not want to walk up to your trap and have a bald eagle in your trap. 1, hopefully it's alive. 2, that's going to be a shit show trying to get that bird out of there. 3, oh my God, if it's dead, are you in trouble? Like, whoa, it is a bad scene, man. It never happened to me. I've seen it happen to people, and there is no forgiveness on that stuff. Like don't use site exposed bait. So what do I mean by visual stimuli? A popular one is you get some of that like wrapping paper ribbon, that like real shiny stuff. You probably have some in your closets right now. That and an old CD for the younger people. That's what we used to have music on, is a CD, kind of like a DVD, but just for sounds. You can use an old DVD too. And I'll hang that ribbon, tie that ribbon to the CD, hang that from a tree limb above one of my sets for bobcats. The wind will blow that CD around. It's shiny. It's shimmery. It'll get a bobcat's attention. So unlike canines, foxes, coyotes, wolves, who are using mostly smell, bobcats are visual predators. They don't have the olfactory senses of a canine. They don't have the sense of smell. They're mostly using their eyes. So you want to bring them in with that visual device, the CD in the tree. And then once they're in, they're close enough, they'll probably smell whatever you've got down there. Some all predator, a mouse nest, whatever you've got in your dirt hole set, right? Also, cage traps turn out to be really good for bobcats because you can hang that visual stimuli in the trap. So if you covered a wire cage trap, like we talked about, with like pine boughs or just rocks, even if you wanted to, like make it dark, like kind of a cave, and really camouflage with the environment, and you put that shiny CD back in there, you can catch a bobcat. Now, because you're putting stuff on top of the cage to make it not sight exposed, you could hang a whole bird in there if you wanted to. Feathers, a wing, duck wings, pheasant wings are great for this because they're not exposed to birds. Birds can't see it from the air, so it's not sight exposed bait. So if you hang that in the back of the trap, bobcats will go in there a lot. Now, again, you still have to haul that freaking giant trap around, which is tough. You also have to get a stout trap. Like I said before, bobcats will tear your shit apart. They are not into being trapped at all. Like some animals will just kind of lay down and trying to hide in a trap, not realizing what's happening. Bobcats will not. Whether that's a dirt hole set, whether it is a cage trap or a cable device, that bobcat is going to do everything it can to root that thing up out of the ground and run off. So for that reason, I know we talked about this last week, but you catch your first bobcat, you're going to want to take pictures of it in the trap. You're going to want to like just admire the moment. I would not recommend you do that. It's been working for 12 hours to get out of that trap, and now it has the most motivation it's ever going to have because it sees you walking up to it. Get close enough to where you can make a calm, effective, lethal shot and take the shot. You could take pictures afterwards. You can control the situation more. I would just hate for anybody to lose a cat that pulls out at the last minute because they were too excited, if that makes sense. Cage trap for bobcat. See, it works. Here's a picture of one. Cable restraint for the bobcat. Now, this is some people call this a bobcat cubby. So you see that white looking flower? That's actually a piece of like tinsel from a tree that's hanging by a fishing line. And then I have some bait down in there under that rock, and I've narrowed the foothold area. So like with those logs, like it has to step somewhere. And I want to control the places it steps to get to that smelly bait in there, right? You see there's like cotton balls and some rocks on top of it that it'll have to move and paw at that set if it wants to get to where the real smell is, deep down 6 inches in there. And at some point, you see those 2 horizontal sticks? That's where the trap is, right in between those. I want it to step there. And I'm trying to do everything I can to make it step there. So I know this isn't a box or like a conibear set, like other cubby sets we've looked at, but just so you know, folks will call this a cubby set, even though really it's a dirt hole set with some extra steps. But if you hear cubby set for bobcat, they're probably talking about this. Wolf. Wolves are only legal to trap in some areas of the United States. Please look at your local regulations when you do this. Essentially, for wolves, you are looking for a coyote set on steroids. You want 4 springs, you want a bigger trap, you want a drag, or you want 3 anchors or 2 really deep anchors. You do not like the amount of power a wolf has. You just don't want to mess with. You don't want to mess with it pulling out at any point. Let's look at this. Some general considerations. So use heavy chain, at least 3/16. This chain you see that I have is not 3/16 chain. This is the chain that comes with the trap. And if I was to buy a wolf trap, which you can buy, could be the same trap, just it'll come with heavy chain. But if it doesn't come with heavy chain, or you're going to use some large coyote traps, you replace that chain with heavy chain. Weld all connections shut, including J hooks, X hooks. So if you see this right here on my swivel, this is a J hook. I just have it crimped shut. For wolves, you want that welded shut. It will pull it out. If you're using a drag instead of a rebar stake, know that wolf will drag that a long time. You may you'll be able to follow the drag ideally, but it won't be as easy as you think it is, especially if it's wintertime, it's snowing, it's raining or whatever. Just be aware of that. Every day you need to set that trap off, inspect it. Even if you didn't get one, look at everything to make sure it's not damaged or something came loose. If you have a powerful enough wolf trap and you don't do anything wrong, you may hold a mountain lion. You may hold a grizzly bear or a black bear. In Maine, it's legal to trap black bear. So if you're in Maine and you're going for wolf and you get a black bear, kudos to you. But everywhere else, you don't want to trap a black bear. You need to have a plan in place for how you are going to get that black bear out of that foothold trap without getting eaten, ideally. That's where a trapping partner comes in handy. You can use a catch pole. You can use a big plywood shield like we talked about last week. You can use these. They're essentially big hooks that you use to pull these 2 levers back. that will open up the foothold enough for that bear to pull away. If it's a grizzly bear, I don't know what to tell you, man. I wouldn't, if I lived in grizzly country, I wouldn't wolf trap until those grizzly bears were well asleep during the winter, because I don't want to mess with one. I don't want to mess with a black bear either, but so you know. Next slide. There's a dirt hole set for a wolf. You'll see the heavier chain is pretty evident there. You'll see a spring. So you see that spring is at the end of the chain, right above the stake. So when I talked about the drag catching on like a sapling and not having a hard stopping point to pull away on, the spring accomplishes that same thing, where unless it maxes out that 250-pound spring, it won't ever get a hard stop to really yank its paw out of that trap. It'll get a springy stop where it won't be able to get a good grip to do it. This looks like it's being trapped for relocation purposes. I'm judging that based on the wolf's coat. It's probably summertime. So this is probably a government trap picture. But you'll also notice on that trap it has 4 springs, not 2, like we talked about earlier. That's a coyote in a cable restraint. I know that, but there's an idea of how a cable restraint would work for wolves. I've never seen a wolf in a cable restraint, so never heard of one. But in theory, it's possible. It's in the best management practices book, so it's in the slideshow. Next is badger. Badgers are basically big weasels. There's like 7 different kinds of weasels, and they all act the same. They all have the same kind of footprints. They really are just looking for size. Badgers, there are a lot of different places. Some states you can trap them, some states you can't. Wisconsin, the badger state, can't trap badgers. So look out for that. Dirt hole sets work great. The best way to trap badgers, if you're out in like South Dakota or North Dakota, where there seems to be badgers everywhere, is to find where a badger's hole is and use that hole as its own dirt hole. Bed your trap right in front of it, put some scent on it. Badger's going to move from hole to hole to because it probably lives in multiple. It's going to smell a new badger or a beaver cast or whatever you got there, and it's going to try and run down that hole. Going to get caught in its foothold. Thing to remember though, badgers are wide-bodied and short legs. So to accommodate this, you may be better off moving that trap farther left or farther right than you would for a coyote or a fox, just because, I mean, it wouldn't be uncommon to have 8 to 12 inches of belly between legs. Kind of like they're just too far apart. It won't walk one foot in front of the other. It just kind of waddles. So sets for badger, dirt hole set. There's one that worked. This is out in South Dakota. That's an average size badger. Next is fisher. I've never trapped fisher. I drew a tag once and then I had to work and never got to go out for them, and I haven't drawn another tag since. I really want to though. I think they're just super cool. They're like a weasel the size of a fox. So they're like a land otter. They are just the coolest looking thing. They're mean. They will get after it. They're like discount Wolverines, man. They're between 35, 47 inches overall length, 8.5, 10 pounds. Some fishers will have a colored patch on their chest. They occur in North America. They're found in the Northwest, Northeast, and northern portions of Midwest states like Wisconsin. Man, they just look cool. So sets for fisher. This is where we're looking at cubby sets work really well, or you'll see, I don't know if you can see that notification, but hold on. Is the right one? There we go. So we have a body grip that looks like it's a 160, and then you have bait above it on this leaning pole. A lot of fishers are caught in this fashion on the bottom there. Fisher climbs up the pole, has to go through your body grip that's wired to that pole to get to the bait. Now remember, side exposed bait rule. If that is fur, feathers, or fish, it has to be covered up. So what people will do is they'll wrap it up in pine boughs and wire those pine boughs to the top of the bait. I've never made those sets. I was setting cubby sets, which is the picture right above that for fisher. And just because I'm more comfortable with it, and I know if I don't catch a fisher, I'll probably catch a coon, probably catch some weasels, maybe skunk, possum, even a fox. But there's some recommendations on top on that diagram on the door size, width, and height, with the trap window, frame wire. This is all stuff that you get out of the BMP manual, so it's worthwhile to have. Let's see. Okay, marten is the next. Marten is small tree-dwelling mink. Well, same size as a mink, but it's like a smaller version of a fisher, also in the weasel family. So if you're in an area with fisher, marten, weasels, mink, and otters, they all leave the exact same looking track. The only thing that differentiates them is size, right? Like mink and marten shouldn't be in the same habitat. If you're along a river, it's probably a mink. If you're in a pine forest, it's probably a marten. Weasel is much smaller than a mink, but if you're first time trapping or tracking mink, you could get confused by a large weasel and a small mink track. They could look the same. Fisher, much bigger than a marten, about the same size as an otter. If you're along a creek, it's going to look like probably an otter. If you're along in the forest, it's going to be a fisher. There you go. Food habits. Martens are opportunistic feeders, large array of animal and plant materials, so you could bait them with just about anything. But again, all predator works for most stuff. Let's see. The biggest thing for marten is these mailbox traps. So they use like those newspaper mailboxes. You can also build them out of wood, like you see in the diagram here. But ideally, you use that 120, which is the 4.5-inch body grip trap, in a mailbox that you've cut slots in. They work the best. They are used all over the West where you can trap for marten to great success. Wonderful. Now you're going to set these ideally on that same kind of leaning tree set that you did that we saw earlier for fisher. Now the difference is there are some states that have regulations on how high up a trap must be set. Like in Wisconsin, it has to be set 5 feet up in a tree, but it can't be closer. It can't be farther. There's all kinds of different regulations. So again, read your regulations. All right, we're almost done, guys. Fur handling. I have this nice link on fur handling, what it means. So there's a couple different kinds of fur once you have it done. You have in the round or whole. Now, in the 1980s and 90s, when trapping was just going gangbuster and you were making $40 a coon, people would fill a truck bed up with coons they trapped and bring that to the fur buyer and let the fur buyer deal with the skinning and the fleshing and all that. Not as popular anymore because you just can't get I don't know a fur buyer that would take a full coon. I don't care what condition it is. Green skin, that's what I normally do, which is I don't flesh them. I don't stretch them. I just skin them, back seal them, put them in the freezer until I'm ready to take them to the tannery or whatever. That's green. Now, fleshed fur, that's what you see up in this picture here. So that's scraping all the excess fat and meat off the hide and then stretched, which is once you flesh it, you want to stretch it. There's no point in fleshing it and not stretching it, just like there's no point in stretching it without fleshing it. It's just a natural process. So you're going to flesh it, scrape all that excess meat and fat off the hide. Then you're going to put it on a stretcher. I have here, this one is for mink and muskrat. You could use it on small coon. You could use it for marten. But they have different sizes based on the animals you're going after. In the picture, those look like coons. And looks like they made their own. You make their own a lot. So once you scrape the fat off, you put it on one of these, you stretch it out with pegs. These has these fancy little grippers, so I don't need to peg anything to wood. Once it dries for a period of 30 to 40 days, depending on temperature, depending on humidity in your part of the country, then you take that to the fur buyer in one big bundle, and fur buyer will assess 2 or 3 of your furs out of the bundle, say, yes, this is a lot of XL medium grade furs, and I will offer you $7 per fur, or whatever the case is. There you go. Fur usage. This is what I do primarily with all my furs, is I get them used and I give them out to friends. I made this sweet hat out of raccoon. It's a musher's hat. I got ear mitts. I got a cool tail in the back. I got these matching mittens made. So the website you see behind you is Fox USA Furs. They're out of Duluth, Minnesota. If you're ever in Duluth, I recommend you stop by their shop. So this is all fur that you have to catch. They'll make whatever you want out of it, but you have to catch it. Beaver pelt koozies are cool. They do coats. I have one of these stretched beavers in my basement just as a decoration. No end to the cool stuff you can make. Really, really encourage everybody to go use their own fur for something like this. Meat handling. We're going to get into the recipe portion now. This is kind of just a blanket. Don't consume meat you believe to be unsafe or that is spoiled. The thing to remember with trapping is once you've trapped it, it may have sat for up to 24 hours. Like if you leave a trap that you just set and you don't come back for 24 hours, you need to acknowledge the possibility that an animal has been in that trap since about 15 minutes after you left yesterday. So if it's like it is now, and it's going to be 20 degrees at night and 50 degrees in the day for me, I know for some of that time that animal's been sitting in the sun with its guts in. Meat can spoil that way. If you think it might be spoiled, don't eat it. That said, the recipe we're talking about tonight is bobcat carnitas. So bobcat carnitas recipe, we made this at the wild game, not wild game potluck, it was a wild game competition at Rendezvous, which is one of our big fundraisers last year. We did not get first, but it was still pretty good. So this is the front quarters of a bobcat, but it'll work with cougar. It'll work with any kind of like javelina or wild pig. You can use it with the rear quarters on a bobcat as well. Let's walk through this process here. Oh, Ryan Callahan tried this and he loved it. Big fan. So if that name means anything to you, I'm dropping the name. Let's see, ingredients: 2 front quarters from 1 bobcat, boned out, approximately 5 pounds of meat, salt, ground pepper. You guys can read it. You're going to get these slides. Right, so we're going to slow cook that down and pull it till you have what looks like that. So it's essentially like a pulled, spicy Mexican meat. Served with warm tortillas, cilantro, I don't know how to say that, Mexican cheese, and white onion. You're basically just making street tacos with it. You can do burritos and stuff. So preheat oven to 325 degrees. Put the bone out meat that's already been seasoned in a pressure cooker, whatever you want. Put the meat in the pot, brown all over. Put the meat in the Dutch oven. Put the Dutch oven in the oil or in the oven. Cook it down until you pull it. Then you add the onions, garlic, all that stuff. Deglaze the Dutch oven with beer. I prefer Mexican beer, but you can use any beer you want. You guys can read this, but essentially you're shredding the meat while maintaining a bunch of flavor. Then you're putting on warm tortillas with white onions, cilantro, and some of that Mexican cheese. You could do like a green salsa is really good with it, but I imagine it would make anything pretty good. Wonderful way to cook a cat. If you are lucky enough to trap a bobcat, I recommend you try this. And that's all I've got. Questions on part 2. I'm sorry we ran over. We're going to run over on all of them. There's just too much information for me to crush these down into an hour. So anybody got any questions? Marcus.
Hey, I'll throw a question out there. Whenever we're talking about scent and the time of year,
Sure.
I'm kind of new to trapping, but kind of the wives' tale, right? From people that I talk to, they talk about the spring smell of wet earth and petrichor affects the predatory blood smell of a predator canine. Is there validity to that? They can obviously smell it also, but does that cover the blood smell in a predatory canine, in your opinion? Do you run out of active coyote traps as warm spring rains come?
No, so the opposite happens for me. The warmer it gets, like towards, well, so coyote season in Wisconsin ends February 15th. But like right now when it's warm, the scent travels farther in the warm than it will in the cold. The colder it is, the less that scent effective that scent's going to be. But I actually find the opposite effect is. But I'm also using a whole mix of stuff, man. Like if I put out 6 sets, I've probably got 6 different scents going on, just because I play with my own stuff. I'll do like a fox gland and beaver castor. I'll do just fox gland, just coyote gland, coyote pea, fox pea. The thing to remember though is when you're looking to buy these, it's going to be like $12 an ounce, $20 for 4 ounces and all kinds of stuff. Get the 4 ounce. You're going to use it, and then get some vegetable glycerin. It's like a gel. You get it from Amazon. It's super cheap. But you can add vegetable glycerin, like 3 parts vegetable glycerin for 1 part lure, and you're just going to increase the volume. You're kind of watering it down a little bit, but it's going to go so much further. And that's what I've always done since I was a kid. And you end up making a little bit of scent go a lot farther.
Copy. Thanks.
Yeah. Next question. Don't tempt me. I'll end the slideshow. Where we at here? All right. I'm going to stop sharing, but and then we will end the recording here. And then we're going to ask more questions. Hold on. stop recording.